In my first of two preliminary fall weather outlooks, I covered four zones that I expected, really just talking about temperature trends and overall precipitation trends that were looking to start showing up for fall. But now that we're 2 months past that, in this video, I will use the latest official information to give you an accurate fall weather outlook and break it down into more zones so you know exactly what's going to come your way. In terms of precipitation trends for us here, warmer waters in the eastern Pacific tend to create an active southern jet stream towards late fall, giving the south more precipitation. The graphics on the left side of your screen show how El Nino works, with warmer water receding back into portions of the eastern Pacific due to weak trade winds. And here's what El Nino did in the strong El Nino that we had into fall of 2015. You can see how the southern tier basically got lit up with all that precipitation for us here, pretty much all the way from California to the Carolinas and the mid-Atlantic. That's where a good bit of precipitation above average was falling. With that being said, models show a dry start to fall for many southern areas. You can see that drought developing into the Four Corners region, as well as overall lower than average precipitation levels for us here in portions of Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, according to this model anyway, as well as back into the Pacific Northwest. The only wet areas on this graphic come out of the plains and in a few spots in the Northeast, but overall this precipitation outlook is pretty quiet for us here from that model. But notice how the models show more precipitation taking hold there by the end of the fall into portions of the southern and eastern tier, all the way from the Arclotexon over and into the Carolinas. That's where it looks like at least slight to moderate El Nino trends will be going up for us here in terms of the amount of precipitation falling compared to average. So here's a look at the seasonal precipitation outlook from NOAA and the Climate Prediction Center. Overall, it looks to be a fairly tame precipitation outlook with slightly above average precipitation for us here in the southeast. A few areas of below average precipitation, one in the Four Corners, one over into the Pacific Northwest, and one a slight below average trend for us there in the Great Lakes. And that leads me in here to my official fall precipitation forecast for us here in the second preliminary version that I'm doing right now. You can see I have the best chance for below average conditions coming in a minor to moderate fashion there in the Pacific Northwest, but overall the entire northern tier and moving into the Great Lakes region just being a little bit below average in the precipitation department. Also into portions of the Four Corners, far eastern Arizona as well, those areas especially getting in on the chance for a little bit of drought for us, with the precipitation beginning to pick up especially towards the late fall there into portions of the southeast, the lower to mid-Mississippi River Valley, and of course also going on over to the mid-Atlantic region. Now shifting on over to our temperature trends. In the past, temperature has been rather variable in fall despite El Nino. This means that it is best to follow only model trends for this fall's weather conditions. You can see some of the situations for us that are developing. When you talk about an El Nino winter, you often talk about cooler than average conditions coming for the southern tier, but you can see how that pretty much did not apply back in 2009, a different El Nino year and fall into winter season that we had. This model shows nothing but warmth. You can see just intense heat building over much of the country. That's not necessarily what's going to happen, but I do expect warmer than average conditions for most of the country indeed as we head into this fall. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean that you're not going to see fall and cooler temperatures move in. Just doesn't mean means it's just not going to be as comfortable as you might like. Here's the Climate Prediction Center's take on this fall. You can see pretty much showing warmer than average conditions for about 75 to 80% of the country for us here, with the eastern half as well as the far western half getting in on most of that warm air, with the central and north central tier getting in on at least the equal chances for warmer and cooler air. The most heat would come into that Four Corners region, and remember, that's where we're pairing up with some drought. So here's a look at the fall temperature forecast that I am officially providing for you here in the second preliminary outlook. You can see the Pacific Northwest, portions of Arizona, New Mexico, and far western Texas, and then over into the mid-Atlantic and Northeast. Those are where I have the best chance for above average temperatures, but notice how pretty much the entire country is at least slightly above average, 10-year average for us here, with the only spot really having a chance of maybe getting below average being up there into portions of eastern Montana and the Dakotas. Again, I'll be releasing my final fall forecast for you here in just a couple of weeks, so be looking forward to that in just a little bit as I revise this just a little bit more. But here's a look at the overall zones that I would watch for fall severe weather. You can see coming into the Arclotexon region as well as into the Mid-South. That's where we have the best chance for fall severe weather as we start to see El Nino pull on in. But overall, it's just the southeastern tier of the country for us here, where an isolated severe storm may pop up out of this activity. So that's something to watch. And one other thing I want to talk about is the tropical potential. Note that hurricane season is not over even in October, and you can see from places like Central America, there in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, where Idalia formed, all the way on over into portions of the Atlantic. Storms, you can kind of see how they tend to move over Florida and then head on off towards the northeast. Again, the main development region begins to quiet down, so that's good with no hurricanes necessarily out in the Atlantic, but with the hotter than normal conditions in the water that we've been seeing, that can't be ruled out either. So we just need to watch even into November for some isolated activity, at least some weaker activity close to home for sure. So let's give you that fall outlook compared to average. I've got warm and wet conditions for you there in the south and east as well as the Carolinas. The best chance for the potential of severe weather coming there into the Arklatex region. Warmer than average conditions coming for the northeast with near average precipitation there. I've got conditions being a bit wet for you here coming out of the Midwest and heading on over into the lower to mid-Mississippi River Valley. And then I've got dry and warm conditions sitting over here into portions of the Great Lakes region. Slightly dry conditions getting going here into portions of the north central tier, where we'll also have the best chance for at least a little bit of cooler to move on in. It'll be the driest and warmest compared to average there in the Pacific Northwest, with near average conditions developing over portions of most of the other areas, with drought there in the Four Corners region. Thank you so much for watching my second preliminary fall weather forecast. Go on over and hit the subscribe button, as well as like this video and leave any comments, questions, or concerns below.